My daughter left my 3 grandchildren with me, and 10 years later she accused me of kidnapping. I still remember the sound of Sarah's car pulling away that October's morning in 2008. The engine needed work. It made this rattling noise that always worried me, but she said she couldn't afford to fix it. I stood on the porch with Emma, Lucas, and baby Olivia, waving until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Emma was 5 then, Lucas 3, and Olivia just 18 months old, still wobbly on her chubby legs. "When's Mommy coming back?" Emma asked, her small hand gripping mine. "Soon, sweetheart," I told her, though Sarah had been vague about the timeline. She said she needed to sort some things out, find a better job, get on her feet. Her boyfriend had left her. The apartment rent was overdue, and she looked so thin and exhausted that morning, like a shadow of the vibrant girl who used to dance around my kitchen singing off-key to the radio. The first week, she called every night. The kids would crowd around the phone, telling her about their day, the park, the cookies we baked, the cartoon they watched. Her voice sounded strained, distant, but she always said she loved them. Always said she'd see them soon. By the second week, the calls came every other day. Then twice a week. Then once a week, usually on Sunday afternoons when I'd started to expect them. I didn't push. I knew my daughter was struggling, and I thought giving her space, giving her time to heal and rebuild, was what a good mother would do. What she needed. I enrolled the kids in school and daycare. Emma started kindergarten at the elementary school 3 blocks away, the same one Sarah had attended. Lucas went to a preschool program at the community center. I rearranged my work schedule at the hospital. I was a night nurse then, so I could be there for morning drop-offs and bedtime stories. My husband Richard helped when he could, but he was dealing with his own health issues, diabetes that wasn't well controlled, and he tired easily. The months passed in a blur of routine and small joys. Emma lost her first tooth. Lucas learned to write his name. Olivia started stringing words together into sentences that made us laugh. "Grammy, juice now," she'd demand, hands on her tiny hips. So serious and bossy that Richard said she reminded him of my own mother. Sarah's calls became sporadic. Sometimes she'd go 3 weeks without calling. Then suddenly, phone on a Tuesday morning when the kids were at school, crying, saying she missed them terribly. She'd promised to visit soon, to come get them soon, but the visits never materialized. When I asked for an address where I could send pictures or letters, she said she was moving around a lot, staying with friends, that it was complicated. I started to worry in a different way, not just about Sarah's well-being, but about what this limbo meant for the children. They stopped asking when Mommy was coming back. Emma, perceptive beyond her years, stopped talking about her mother altogether unless Sarah called. Lucas seemed to forget her face between phone calls. Once, he asked me to show him a picture, so he could remember. That broke my heart in ways I didn't know were possible. In the second year, I made it official. Not adoption. I couldn't bring myself to do that. Couldn't give up on Sarah completely. But I got temporary guardianship through the family court. It meant I could make medical decisions, sign school forms, do all the things you need legal authority to do when you're raising children. Sarah had to be notified, had to sign papers. She did, without argument, over FedEx. She called that night, drunk or high or both, crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said she was a terrible mother, that the kids deserved better, that she'd get herself together and come back for them. I believed her because I needed to believe her. By the 3rd year, the kids called me Mom sometimes, though I always gently corrected them. "I'm Grammy," I'd say. "Your mom loves you very much. She's just not able to be here right now." But it felt like a lie, even to me. How could I explain to a child that their mother loved them when she chose not to be with them day after day, month after month? Richard's health declined in the 4th year. The diabetes led to kidney problems, and suddenly our world shifted again. I cut back my hours at the hospital to care for him and the kids. Money got tight. The temporary guardianship needed to be renewed, and Sarah was harder to reach by then. She'd call from different numbers, sometimes from pay phones. Once from what sounded like a bus station, announcements echoing in the background. She always sounded like she was running from something. I tried to find her. I hired a private investigator for a month, spending money we didn't have. But Sarah had become a ghost. She'd worked cash jobs, stayed off the grid, moved from city to city along the West Coast. The investigator found an arrest record in Portland for petty theft, a stint in a women's shelter in Sacramento, but no current address. When I finally heard from her next, a random call on Easter Sunday, I asked her outright, "Sarah, do you want your children back? Because if you do, I'll help you. We'll figure it out together. But if you don't, if you can't, I need to know." The silence on the line lasted so long, I thought she'd hung up. Then, "I don't know, Mom. I don't know what I want. I don't know who I am anymore." It was the most honest she'd been in years, and it terrified me. The kids were thriving despite everything. Emma made honor roll. Lucas was obsessed with dinosaurs and could name dozens of species. Olivia was in ballet class, twirling around the house in a pink tutu that was too big for her, all gap-toothed smiles and boundless energy. They had friends, routines, stability. They had a home. Richard passed away in year 7, quietly in his sleep after a long decline. The kids grieved in their own ways, Emma with tears and questions about heaven, Lucas with silence and nightmares, Olivia with confusion about why Grandpa wouldn't wake up. Sarah called for the funeral, said she was coming, but never showed. I stopped making excuses for her to the children after that. When they asked why she wasn't there, I just said I didn't know. By year 8, Sarah's calls had dwindled to maybe twice a year. A brief call on Christmas, another on her birthday. The conversations were awkward, forced. The kids would talk to her out of obligation, not enthusiasm. Emma was 13 by then, old enough to feel angry about the abandonment, though she hid it behind teenage eye rolls and indifference. "Whatever," she'd say when I mentioned her mother. "She's basically a stranger." I thought maybe this was just how our story would end, that Sarah would drift further and further, away until the calls stopped altogether, and the kids would heal from the wound of her absence, and we'd be okay. We'd survived this long. We were a family, the 4 of us, even in our grief and imperfection. Then came the knock on the door in year 10. It was a sheriff's deputy, official and somber, serving me with papers. Sarah was suing for custody. Not just custody, she was accusing me of kidnapping, of keeping her children from her, of parental alienation. The document was full of legal language that made my hands shake. Unlawful retention, denial of parental rights, immediate return of minor children requested. I stood in my doorway, papers in hand, unable to process what I was reading. Kidnapping? I'd saved these children. I'd fed them, clothed them, held them through nightmares and illness and grief. I'd given up my career, my savings, my own life to make sure they had stability when their mother had vanished into chaos. The lawyer Sarah had found some legal aid. Attorney in Seattle had painted me as the villain in a story I didn't recognize. According to the filing, Sarah had only been gone briefly, had maintained regular contact, had always intended to return, but I had manipulated the guardianship system to steal her children. It claimed I had discouraged her calls, moved without giving her my address, told the children lies about her. None of it was true, none of it. Emma found me crying at the kitchen table that night, the papers spread in front of me. She was 15 now, tall and beautiful and so much stronger than I'd ever been at her age. "What's wrong, Grammy?" I couldn't hide it from her. She read the papers, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to rage. "She can't do this," Emma said, her voice shaking. "She left us. She didn't want us. The law says she's your mother," I said quietly. "And mothers have rights. You're more of a mother to us than she's ever been." Lucas had wandered in, 12 now and nearly as tall as me, all gangly limbs and braces. "What's going on?" When we explained it to him, he just shook his head. I barely remember her. Why would she want us now? Olivia, at 11, was the only one who seemed conflicted. She'd been so young when Sarah left that her memories were haziest. built more from photographs and stories than actual experience. Maybe she got better, Olivia said softly. Maybe she wants to be a real mom now? The custody hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. I hired a lawyer I couldn't afford with money I borrowed from my sister. We gathered evidence. The guardianship papers Sarah had signed, phone records showing the sporadic contact, testimonies from the kids' teachers and doctors and friends, parents about their stable life with me, character witnesses who could speak to the decade I'd spent raising them. My lawyer warned me that parental rights were powerful things in the eyes of the law, that unless Sarah was proven unfit, unless there was documented abuse or current drug use or criminal behavior, the court would favor reunification, that Sarah's long absence might not matter as much as I thought it would, that she could claim she'd been struggling with mental health, poverty, circumstances beyond her control, and the judge might believe in redemption and second chances. But what about the kids? I asked. What they want? Emma and Lucas are old enough that the judge will consider their preferences. Olivia's on the borderline. But ultimately, parental rights usually trump children's wishes unless there's compelling evidence of harm. I felt sick. I saw Sarah for the first time in 10 years in that courtroom. She looked different, older, obviously, but also more put together than I expected. She'd gained weight in a healthy way. Her hair was neat. She wore a conservative dress and minimal makeup. She looked like someone who'd gotten her life together. And I realized with a sinking feeling that maybe she had. Her lawyer presented evidence. A steady job as a hotel manager in Seattle, an apartment lease, completion of a substance abuse treatment program, regular attendance at therapy, character references from her employer and her sponsor. She'd spent the last 18 months rebuilding her life, her lawyer explained. She'd thought of her children every day, had wanted to contact them, but had been ashamed of her earlier failures, had wanted to wait until she could offer them a proper home. She hadn't known she needed to maintain regular contact to preserve her parental rights. She'd thought the guardianship was temporary, a helping hand, not a permanent separation. When Sarah took the stand, she cried. She talked about postpartum depression after Olivia, about an abusive relationship, about addiction that had spiraled out of control. She said leaving the kids with me had been the hardest decision of her life, but she'd done it because she'd loved them, too much to let them see her at her worst. She said she'd always planned to come back, that she'd just needed more time than she'd expected. She looked directly at me when she said, "I thought my mother was helping me. I didn't realize she was replacing me." The words hit like a physical blow. Was that true? Had I somehow, subconsciously, wanted Sarah to disappear so I could keep the children? Had I done enough to encourage her return? Or had I secretly hoped she'd stay away? Emma testified, fierce and unwavering in her loyalty to me. She told the judge that Sarah was a stranger, that I was the only mother she really knew, that moving to Seattle would mean leaving her friends, her school, her entire life. Lucas echoed her sentiments more quietly, his discomfort with the whole proceeding obvious. Olivia was the only one who wavered, who admitted that maybe she'd like to get to know her mother, that maybe they could try. The judge's ruling came 3 weeks later. Split custody, transitioning to Sarah having primary custody within 6 months. Emma and Lucas could choose to stay with me when they turned 16 and 18 respectively. But until then, they'd spend weekdays with Sarah and weekends with me initially, then gradually shift to living primarily with her. Olivia would move to Seattle within the month. Sarah didn't get everything she wanted. The judge had seen through some of her claims, had recognized my decade of sacrifice. But she got her children back. Not because she'd earned them, I thought bitterly, but because biology trumped love in the eyes of the law. I helped pack their things with a heart that felt like it was being torn from my chest. 10 years of memories stuffed into boxes and suitcases. Emma's honor roll certificates, Lucas's dinosaur collection, Olivia's ballet trophies. The night before they left, we all crowded into my bed like we used to when they were small and scared of thunderstorms. We didn't talk much. We just held each other, memorizing the feeling of being together, being whole. "I love you, Grammy," Emma whispered in the darkness. Nothing's going to change that. Not distance, not time, not her. I love you too, baby, I said, knowing it was the last time I'd tuck her in for a long while. All of you, forever. When Sarah's car pulled up the next morning, a different car, newer, more reliable, I walked them out with their bags. Sarah looked nervous, uncomfortable, like she knew she was taking something that didn't belong to her. Thank you, she said to me, for everything you've done. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to tell her she had no right to thank me, that thanks was inadequate for 10 years of sacrifice. But I just nodded, because the kids were watching, and they'd been through enough. As I watched them drive away, Emma's tear-streaked face pressed against the back window, I felt the same helpless ache I'd felt a decade earlier. But this time, I wasn't waving at taillights and hoping for return. This time I was letting go of the children I'd raised, the family I'd built, the life I'd created from the ruins Sarah had left behind. They say you can't kidnap your own grandchildren when you're keeping them from harm and neglect. But the law sees things differently. The law says biology matters most, that parents deserve second chances, that redemption is always possible. Maybe Sarah really had changed. Maybe she'd be the mother they deserved now. Maybe in time, they'd even thank her for coming back. But as I stood on my empty porch that morning, the same porch where this whole journey began, I knew one thing for certain. I hadn't kidnapped anyone. I'd simply loved 3 children when nobody else would, raised them when they needed raising, and given them a home when they had none. And if doing that made me guilty of something, then I'd carry that guilt with pride for the rest of my life.